Increasing by over 60% from around 1 metric ton per hectare between 1995 and 2004 to around 2 metric tons per hectare between 2005 and 2014. However, we have also noted that these yields are basically volatile to external shocks like weather shocks like droughts. They drop significantly, as was the case in the between 2015 and 2017 second year in the chart. So I just want to now highlight why previous subsidies may have underachieved. One of the issues that is clearly coming out of literature is that effective targeting has been one of the key issues, whereby there have been a mix of objectives, too many objectives, government trying to achieve too many objectives in one program. And we have also seen that a related problem to effective targeting is the displacement of commercial cells, whereby every kg of commercial fertilizer cells has displaced between 0.15 and 0.21 kilograms of fertilizers. And as the 2021-22 season has shown, fertilizer subsidies may be difficult to sustain in the long run because their prices are mostly determined outside the country because we rely on external importation. Also, we have seen that since its introduction in 2005, the subsidy program has dominated the budget for the Ministry of Agriculture. So just as a case study, I've considered the period between 2009 and 2010 financial year and 2019 and 2020, just to see how it has been behaving, whereby the subsidy program has dominated over other agricultural investments like agricultural research and development, agricultural extension, agricultural irrigation, and livestock development, despite that its dominance started falling a little bit from the 2016 and 17 financial year. However, when it was made universal, I think the picture has changed, but that graph is simply showing you part of the story. We haven't updated it up to date. The other issue is that there has been declining maize yield response to nitrogen fertilizer. The most recent estimates in terms of how many kilograms of maize we get per 1 kilogram of nitrogen invested in the soil, they are showing that we are getting between 0 and 8 kilograms and about 6 kilograms on average. Those are the recent estimates. However, the old estimates, which are like for 30 years ago, that's the green bar in the chart, they're showing that the maize response rate to nitrogen were around 18 kilograms. However, even with this most optimistic estimates of 18 kilograms of maize per 1 kg of nitrogen in the past, we see that they are still quite low compared to the potential, the regional potential of between 35 and 37 kilograms of maize per nitrogen. So going forward, improving the yield response to nitrogen will be a key intervention. Now I just want to lay the foundation, the rationale for why we need to reform the AIP. So what we're seeing is that actually these reforms are already enshrined in the current national budget, which Parliament is deliberating as we sit here. So it's not a new thing. And also, we think that there is also need for the country to start focusing more on dietary and production diversity instead of policy emphasizing on maize, while we also talk about dietary diversification. We also see that agricultural diversification and commercialization, they are already included in the National Agriculture Policy and its implementation framework, which is the National Agriculture Investment Plan. So these are not new issues. And to emphasize the point, we are saying that the recent adoption of the 10-year Malawi implementation plan for the long-term vision, the Malawi 2063, calls for a rethink of the the programming in the agriculture sector. So at least some of the resources that are being allocated to the Ministry of Agriculture are freed to support other investments within the ministry. And it's also interesting to see that there's also expressed desire at the highest level of government to have a progressive subsidy program. So this, I think, makes the case for reform even stronger. Last but not least, literature has shown that like studies that have been done in India and elsewhere have shown that sustained investments in infrastructure and social services lead to greater long-term payoffs from investments rather than the sole focus on subsidies. So yes, investing in subsidies is good, but when we invest also in economic infrastructure and the social services, the payoffs in the long term are much more than what we could be getting in the short term through the subsidy program. So at this point, I just want to now bring the case forward to propose some of the interventions that we think government and other stakeholders should be considering. So we think that this is the right time for us to start deliberating on these issues right in this room and also beyond this room. So some of the proposals we're presenting here, we would want to see more feedback from policymakers as to what they think about them and whether they are feasible. So the first one, we are proposing that the subsidy program should be streamlined to target farmers that have the land and also probably the labor and other resources to effectively use the inputs instead of just giving it to everyone. We also propose that soil health and land management should be part and parcel of the design of the future subsidy programs, instead of just focusing on organic fertilizers and also improved inputs. We should deliberately be integrating these interventions because we need to raise the maize response to nitrogen fertilizers. We also propose that there should be inbuilt flexibility in the future programs where farmers can be allowed to buy inputs they need. And also even the zoning that we have seen that government has already started incorporating, let's say the livestock component of the current program, which was zoned in the Lower Shire. We think if government can learn from the lessons of doing that, maybe to see how some of those lessons can apply to the other value chains and then maybe expand it. We don't know yet whether this is feasible. We are also proposing that it should be deliberate increased investment in agricultural research and extension services, increasing the numbers of extension workers and scientists, agricultural scientists, I think will benefit this country much more than focusing only on subsidies. And we are proposing for a general improvement of on-farm management practices. At the moment, simple things like weeding, some of them are not done in the correct way. Simple things like applying the right fertilizers at the right time. Those things should be improved. In the medium term, which is a period of between 5 and 10 years, we are proposing that government should consider investing more in public infrastructure. These are roads, rail lines, electricity, and also investing more in social services, especially in critical thinking skills and other cognitive skills, because these have more payoffs for on-farm and also off-farm employment in the long term. We also propose that there should be a deliberate move to promote trade diversification through agricultural policy, and also wherever it is feasible, public-private partnerships that improve and sustain the country's food security should also be promoted. So for this, we think that if we can come up with a rules-based system and an open procurement system or recruitment system whereby government can engage some of the private sector to help it produce maize for the strategic grain reserves, this can be a workable solution, but it depends on the rules that we put on the ground. In the long term, government should explore the possibility of manufacturing some of the fertilizers locally to reduce its vulnerability to the world fertilizer market. However, it is not obvious that this may be feasible, because as a country, we'll still depend on the international market to import the inputs for manufacturing fertilizers. We also need to generate massive amounts of electricity for us to be able to manufacture some of the fertilizers. So this is a food for thought for the long term. We also are proposing that whatever reforms government may choose to implement, it should make sure that the political economic environment is conducive to support those reforms. In my mind, the issues relating to, say, maize markets. If as a country we can create a system where these markets become more predictable, and also the inputs markets, if it can be more predictable, I think it can improve things vastly. We're also not forgetting investments in irrigation to improve water control, to reduce the vulnerability of our production to external weather shocks. Just to conclude my talk, we think this is an opportune time for the country to sit down, rationalize, redesign, and redesign a subsidy program that diversifies and sustains the country's economic growth. Also, a program that incorporates soil fertility and conservation interventions with the sole purpose of raising the agronomic use efficiency of the nitrogen we are investing in our soils. And just to emphasize the point that these interventions will not be possible if we don't streamline and make and introduce a program which is more targeted to support farmers that lack the economic access to fertilizers. And also investing in infrastructure and social services has better payoffs in the future. And also, before I leave here, just to make a comment that on the recent announcement by government to procure fertilizers directly from manufacturers, our take on that is that this could be a double sword, in the sense that it may, at the end of the day, be able to deliver fertilizers to the end users, the farmers, at a lower cost. But this will depend on how government or how the government agencies like Fertilizer Revolving Fund will be able to manage the fertilizer procurements. On the other hand, if the government doesn't find a way of involving the private sector in this proposal, then in the long run, this approach might have detrimental effects on the private sector. But because it is bound to displace massive amounts of fertilizers if the program will continue being an investor program. One last comment. When this policy brief came out, some of the comments I have received personally are that maybe the program is targeting wrong farmers. Maybe it should be targeting commercial farmers. Maybe it should be targeting cooperatives. So my take on that is that yes, but maybe commercial farmers and cooperatives should be targeted by a different program, because targeting commercial farmers in a program like this one will only increase the displacement rate, but might not necessarily resolve the issues that the private sector, the commercial farmers and cooperatives are facing, because their issues might be very different from the issues that the smallholder farmers are facing. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nyondo, for that powerful presentation. His presentation looked at why the subsidy program was introduced. He also looked at the achievements of previous subsidy programs. And of course, he mentioned that previously the subsidy program may have underachieved, and he shared some reasons and why we need to reform the IEP. He mentioned that the current budget, national budget, and NAIP has mentions of that, and even the Malawi 2063 MIP1, that's the 10-year plan, also mentions of the same. Likewise, literature has also proved that we need to at least reform the AIP. And he has mentioned and shared some interventions divided into 3 parts: the short-term, medium, and long-term, where he mentioned of issues of markets, irrigation, cost effectiveness, and he is calling members present, even online, to bring in their views so that we can have a better AIP program. I would like to now invite our discussant, Dr. Yan, a research fellow at International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI, based in Lilongwe. His research mostly focuses on social protection and agriculture policy in Malawi. Welcome, Dr. Yan.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you also Dr. Nyondo for the excellent presentation. As said, my name is Jan Duchoslav, and I was asked to provide some basic discussion of Dr. Nyondo's presentation. What I must say is that I agree with pretty much everything that has been said. Oh yes, the slides. One moment, please. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you very much. So as I said, I would sign pretty much everything that the previous speaker said here. So what I'd like to do now is to perhaps point out a few issues which I think deserve special attention from what already has been said, and which I think are particularly relevant to the discussion. I would first like to draw your attention to this graph that Dr. Nyondo showed you earlier as well, and especially to the last part of it, which shows how much extra maize we're getting for an additional kilo of fertilizer that is put into the ground. I did some quick back of the envelope calculation based on this, and essentially what this leads to is that for the 50 kilos of urea and 50 kilos of NPK that that a farmer gets from AIP, the additional yield from that is 72.5 kilos on average of maize. Now, if you roughly translate that to current prices, that is 60,000 kwacha worth of investment, most of it made in Forex because it's fertilizer that needs to be imported, and that gets you at current price about 15,000 kwacha of maize. Now, I think there are quite a few business people in this room. To me, this doesn't sound like a very, very good investment. Now, the impact of the subsidy itself is even less. So for the 60,000 kwacha, the government gives around 40,000 of subsidy, but because some of that actually crowds out private investment, what that means is that farmers don't buy some of the fertilizer that they would have bought anyway even without the subsidy. So that essentially means that for the 40,000 kwacha that the government invests into this subsidy, the benefit to the farmer is around 12,000 kwacha worth of maize. And now this only happens if the rains are good and if the right agricultural agricultural practices are followed. Now, this is obviously not always the case, which I think reinforces what Dr. Nyondo already said, the need for investment into irrigation so that we don't have to rely on rain-fed agriculture, but also investment into research and development in agricultural technologies and agricultural extension to improve on the agricultural practices that are being followed. Now, Dr. Nyondo also mentioned the conflated or sometimes conflated objectives of the AIP. Depending on who you ask and depending on who you listen to, the AIP is set to be aimed at improving food security, so increasing agricultural production, but also it is often mentioned as a poverty alleviation tool, as a way to assist the poor. Now, these two objectives likely have two different solutions and perhaps also should be targeting different people. If we're trying to increase agricultural production, we should be targeting the productive farmers, those who can actually make good use of that fertilizer. That also touches on the last point that Dr. Nyondo made. Who are the farmers who should be getting this? Well, the ones that can actually make good use of the fertilizer. And for those, if the subsidy is combined with policies such as investment into irrigation, R&D, and agricultural extension, they can be very effective. Now, if we're trying to alleviate poverty, I'll remind you, an investment of 40,000 kwacha to give 12,000 kwacha worth of maize surely farmers who are unproductive because either they don't have the labor capacity in the household or they don't have enough land, those would probably be better served if they are just given even half the cash that the government is currently investing into the subsidy, right? They'll be better off with 20,000 of cash than with 12,000 worth of maize. And so social protection programs, especially cash transfers to such families, such households, would be a more effective way of alleviating their poverty, at least in the short term. And I'll very soon get into what can be done in a slightly longer term. Now, of course, this brings about the question of how to distinguish between the farmers that can be productive, can make productive use of the fertilizer, and those that cannot. There are a number of ways which have been used in the past for this, community-based targeting, but that one is very expensive, it's time-consuming, and it's easily captured by local elites in the villages that where the government is trying to help. Proxy means testing, so looking at things like, you know, does the farmer have a tin roof, etc., etc. Those are also quite expensive and time-consuming. There's, of course, the Unified Beneficiary Registry, the UBR, which in principle is a great idea, but 6 years down the line from it being, when it started being put in place, it is still incomplete and is becoming out of date. And also it is very, very expensive to update. So what else could be done? Well, in the short term, one thing that could be suggested is essentially a self-targeting mechanism. If we would go down the line of providing the subsidy to the more productive farmers and some cash to the less productive ones, if the value of that cash transfer is less than the value of the subsidy, and we give households the choice whether to take one or the other, those who know that they can make a good use of the fertilizer will surely take 40,000 worth of fertilizer. Those who know that they cannot make good use of it will take the cash by themselves. And we don't have to, the government does not have to worry about who is who. Essentially, the farmers know which group they fall into. In the longer term, of course, there are better ways of approaching this. The government has all sorts of administrative data, starting from, you know, databases on birth and death registers, land registers, etc. Now, these at the moment are not necessarily very much up to date. They're not necessarily digitized. They do not necessarily speak to each other, nor do they often speak to the national ID system, which is something that Malawi does have, as opposed to many, many other countries. And that could be used as a platform to expand onto. But once this is done, and if we invest into these databases, improve them, digitize them, make sure that they are seamlessly updated, then these can be used as a targeting tool instead of a dedicated UBR or what arguably would be a less precise system, such as the self-targeting one, which I described. Now, what about the unproductive poor, then the ones that either don't have the land or don't have the labor capacity to actually make use of fertilizer? Well, as I mentioned, social protection may be necessary for some of them, with transfers that could in fact be labeled for what the government believes they should be used for. And research has shown that when you tell people that the money is meant for a certain purpose, they will spend most of it on that purpose, even without enforcement mechanisms. Now, those households that do not have land but do have abundant labor, which is a huge part of rural households in Malawi, in the long term, and this is again something that Dr. Nyondo mentioned, what we need is investment in infrastructure and investment in human capital. If you give these people reliable and affordable electricity, they will be able to produce goods. And Malawians are entrepreneurial, are innovative. If we give people access to good roads and railway, it will connect them to domestic markets and to foreign markets to sell those goods that they have produced. And if we give them better education and health, they will actually be in a position to take advantage of all these new opportunities, whether they are in the rural areas where they stay at the moment, or in the urban areas or elsewhere. So to conclude, because I think I've probably been speaking for longer than what has been allocated to me, the AIP is, I think it can be said, less effective than it could be due to mainly two things. One, low response of crop yields to fertilizer and lack of targeting. So what is needed? In my view, and I think in the view of many others in this room, the subsidies should target productive farmers, while unproductive households should be targeted with social safety nets, such as labeled cash transfers. The AIP and subsidies in general should be complemented with investment in soil quality and with R&D in agricultural technologies and in agricultural extension. And we need investment in infrastructure and human capital. Now, as a last concluding word, there are, we believe, great potential benefits to reforms like this, but also some pitfalls. If they are implemented right, the benefits will be great. If we don't get this right, it will be very costly. So there's of course need to pilot, evaluate, revise, test again before full-scale implementation. And I think I can speak for both MOAPATA and IFPRI that we stand ready to assist with such efforts with our research capacity. And we hope that this will help bring about the reforms that Malawi needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jan, for that discussion. I wouldn't want to make comments again because I'll become the second discussant. So let's move on to the next item on the agenda. Having heard about farmers, I would want us to go into that discussion where the experts will bring us the reality on the ground and the new ideas that everyone would want to hear. We're moving on to the panel discussion. When I invite you, please come to the front. There's a chair reserved for you. So when I call out your name, please walk to the front so that when you bring out your issues, your comments, your ideas, we are able to see you properly. The first one to be invited is our Secretary for Economic Planning and Development, Professor Winford Masanjala. He's the secretary, as I just mentioned, but he is based in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs. He previously served as Secretary for Energy and Director of Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Finance then. He holds a post of Associate Professor of Economics at University of Malawi and previously taught at Louisiana State University. Welcome, Professor Masanjala. We're glad you're here. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Dimitri Yanakis. He is the chairman of the Fertilizer Association of Malawi, and he graduated with a degree in agriculture and a Master's of Science in Tropical Agriculture from Wayne College, University of London in 1995. He became the Operations Director of Farmers World Limited and Malawi Fertilizer Company. Please sit while I talk about you. And then he's, in 2016, he established a smallholder farmer extension service project at Meridian called Farm Services Unit that provides extension services to 12,000 farmers. Please, let's welcome him to the front. to balance the gender. Now I would like to invite Ms. Clara Malikula. She is a trained professional secretary and who after formal employment, she continued with her passion in smallholder farming. Please, may I have Ms. Clara Malikula walk to the front. She is also the board chairperson for NASFAM, and she is a female farmer who has learned to diversify her farming as a way of building resilience against the impact of climate change and to avert market risks in the process, becoming financially stable. So Ms. Malikula has been holding several positions in NASFAM, and now she's currently the chairperson of the board. Welcome, Ms. Malikula. Next is Mr. Frighton Joromole. He is the president of Farmers Union of Malawi. Most of us know him, and he is a sugarcane farmer based in Luangwa, Nkota. He's also a president of the Sugarcane Growers Association of Malawi. And currently he's a member of the board of World Association of Sugarcane and Sugar Beet Growers Association. Welcome, Mr. Njoromole. Last but not least, I would like to invite Honorable Owen Chomanika, MP. I'm looking at where he's seated. Oh, welcome, Honorable Chomanika. He's a member of the Agriculture Committee from Chikwawa Central. He brings us a lot of experience on AIP issues. Let's welcome them and give them the time to share with us. While I also invite the moderator of this session, Dr. Thomas Muntari. He's the Director General of the National Planning Commission. I wouldn't want to talk more about him because a lot is known about him already. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, moderator, for a job well done this far. And I want to recognize the presence of the PS for Agriculture and indeed the chairperson of MAPATA who have organized this event today, and all the senior government officials here and all the protocols observed. This is a very exciting moment when we have very high-level individuals sitting in front of us to dissect some of the issues around the the Affordable Input Program. And I think we all should listen very attentively because there will come a time when Prof. Mangani will also come in to ask you in terms of what your take is in the plenary. But at this time, we just want to give them an opportunity to voice out, having listened to the presentation by Dr. Nyondo, which essentially is representing what MAPATA has come up with, and indeed to the discussant, our colleague from IFPRI. I think a job well done in terms of the discussion on the issues that have come out. I think I want to start by first, and I'm happy that the colleagues from the Ministry of Agriculture are here, including the comptroller, Dr. Buliani is here as well, so that should we be stuck somewhere, we can easily throw some of these questions to them. First, I think let me start with the chairperson, or I'm not the chairperson, the Honorable, I want to get the name right. Honorable Owen Chomanika. Honorable Chomanika, you've always impressed me with the way you've articulated issues. I think the last time we met in Chikwawa, you talked somehow some of these issues, and here we are again today. Do you see from where you sit, having listened to this, that we really need AIP in Malawi? And if we do need it, what do you think is really the main aim that the AIP, you as a member of parliament, representing people out there, should be the target? What should the AIP be focused on if we still need it as a country?
Thank you very much, moderator. I think I'll not take much time, but to respond to that, to say, do we need the AIP? I think from the presentation is titled Options for Redesigning. Automatically, it means if we are redesigning something, we are not taking it out. I think in the first place, we are agreeing that we need the subsidy. The presenter himself is agreeing that we need the subsidy, but it should be redesigned. So I follow the same to say, yes, we need to redesign it, because currently from the challenges that have been presented and the intervention suggested, yes, we need to redesign it. And I agree with the short-term intervention suggested and the medium term and also the long term. But if you look at all of them, they are giving us a dimension that in the first place, it should not be just be AIP. It should be also other issues. For example, if we are to invest in social services, that is no longer AIP. It's something else. It means we need to think about education. We need to think about health. And when you talk of land targeting, we should look at the people who have got the land and the labor and all the factors of production, if I might say so. The people have got the entrepreneurial understanding that really I need to farm from the 2 bags I'm receiving whatsoever. And I think my last comment will be, yes, we need the AIP, but it should be redesigned. And the redesigning, I think it will take a big formation. It should be a bigger reform to this whole thing, because it is taking a bigger chunk of our resources. And the ministry, I think another thing which I would love to say is, all the presentations made here, it seems it's a little bit far from us who are in the mainstream part of making decisions. You, the people with knowledge, who are generating knowledge, to a certain extent, you should also be so closer to us. And this is a plea to civil service, CSOs, and so on. Please get the courage to give us things in this manner and give us things that are really, that will make us to think how best we can do it. Otherwise, we just vote yes or no and pass the budget, pass all the laws and the legislation when we know that we are not sorting out the problems that are really affecting our people. So to answer you, sir, yes, we need it, but it should be reformed and redesigned. And the one has chosen the very good word, not even reforming it, it's redesigning it. That's a very serious thing, which I also agree. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Honorable. We still need the AIP, but it needs to be redesigned. Bwana Njolomole, from where you sit representing farmers, what do you see as the main challenge that the AIP has, that from you as a representative of the farming community, you would have thought if only ABCD was done, the redesigning that we're talking about would really make the AIP worth its salt?
Thank you very much. To begin with, let me thank Mopata Institute for bringing us together like this to look into this critical issue. This issue has actually been in a lot of circles, people discussing about phasing it out. But as I sit here, I'm representing all the farmers in Malawi, be it in Karonga, in Katabe, in Sanje, all over. Those farmers are the ones that I'm actually representing here. And let me also remind you, our first president, late Dr. Banda, may he so rest in peace. When he came, when he started actually ruling this country, he said, Chuma Chirimtaka, our wealth is in the soil. And I tell you, Malawians are hardworking people. And when AIP came, it sort of complemented the very first idea that Dr. Banda had of ensuring that a farmer should be able to produce, feed himself, and sell. Now the coming in of AIP has consolidated that farmers should not only think of feeding themselves, farmers should not only think of feeding themselves when they're working in their gardens. They should also think of selling and looking after their families. They should have money. They should have food every time they want it. So it's very, very important that AIP should be there to assist the farmer. to assist everyone in the family. But while we are looking at that, the other thing that should actually be, together with AIP, we should not only think of maize production, because what we have actually seen AIP doing, it's targeting maize, but we have legumes. For example, soya beans last year did quite a lot. If it actually made up to 80 billion kwacha, if it made 800 billion kwacha, definitely that means legumes are very important to also be considered on AIP. And for AIP to thrive well, I would definitely comment on what Dr. Nyondo said. We need transport. How serious are we? How serious are we when we talk about transport? What we have in Malawi, it's just road transport. Railway line died a long time ago. They are trying to revive it now, and everybody is actually very eager to see that in one of these days, the railway line will go up to Karonga, up to Chitipa, so that the small farmer in Karonga can also be saved. AIP can only do well if logistics are also very good. So definitely, I solely believe that Malawi can do well with AIP. If we have had lots of problems, as we have, lots of challenges, but let's look around from our neighbors and outside. How have they done it? Can we not learn something from them? Can we not actually send our people to go and see if they succeeded? If they are also having challenges just the same as we are, maybe the designing thing we are actually discussing here will be much easier for us after checking what others are doing in other countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I am tempted, thanks so much, Mr. Njolomole, for that. Logistics, very important. At this point, I'm tempted, PS, to come back before I come back to the panel. If you could help us to really let us be reminded of what is the aim of the AIP, so that when we are talking of redesigning it, we are talking of, will we be able to meet the aims of the AIP in the designing format that we are proposing? What are the aims of the AIP? Can you give the mic to the PS or to the comptroller? The mic, please. What are the aims of the AIP? Give it to the PS or the comptroller.
I think, moderator, to summarize, is to achieve household and national food security. That's the whole essence of that. I think we are all aware of the low production, more especially on the smallholder farmer aspect. So the aim of the AIP is to boost that production so that we attain self-food sufficiency. Thank you.
I think that's very, very important for us to bear at the back of our minds. Whenever we are proposing a redesigning or reforms around AIP, whatever we're putting forward, we should ask ourselves, is this enhancing a household and national level food security? Everything aside, because we might be tempted to touch on everything about agriculture productivity and commercialization and everything else. At the end of the day, the politician has to go back and stand on the podium and tell the people that we have enhanced your food security by redesigning AIP in the following manner. Okay, I thought we should have that at the back of the mind. Now, let me get back to our colleagues in the Fertilizer Association. I think, Dimitri, you've held yourselves parliament saying, look, one of the key aspects why we have to reform the AIP is because it's so costly to purchase the fertilizers. And one of the reasons is because there's a middleman in between, and that's the private sector. They're trying to kick the private sector out of the equation just for AIP, not for every fertilizer, by the way, just for AIP program. What is your reaction to that? how does it sit with you as a fertilizer association? And what would you be suggesting as viable alternatives to this?
Thank you, moderator. On that point specifically, I think the majority of us in this room and beyond understand that efficiency comes from competitive behavior in a market. And I would strongly recommend that we continue to promote a vibrant private sector that is competitive and that delivers the highest level of service. So any other model we've seen basically tends to become inefficient and to fail. So I would, again, really advise that we continue to promote the private sector and we allow the private sector to participate, and we should be benefiting from the efficiencies of the participation of the private sector.
Are you agreeing that it would be more efficient if government goes straight to purchase and cuts out the middleman from what is happening currently?
I don't exclude any option. I think options can run in parallel to each other. And I think there is room for government to, if they so wish, to make direct purchases from as close as they can to the manufacturers of the world. And I think that's a good idea, but I don't think that should necessarily be done for the whole program or to crowd out a vibrant private sector. I think the program is an opportunity to boost the private sector. And of course, the private sector on the back of the program is investing in infrastructure, capacity, finance, distribution, and so creating jobs, paying taxes. And it's these taxes that actually fund the program. So I would encourage always that the private sector remains front and center in the program and that it delivers efficiency. But I'm not precluding or saying that, for example, ADMARC should not participate or SFRFM. The parastatals should be there. They also add value to the program. They can bring at times resources that the private sector might not be able to bring in a purely commercial context, and they will complement the program. But I don't think that one, whether the private sector should exclude the public sector or vice versa. I think they should be allowed to operate alongside each other, complement each other, and the stronger in any given year, if one sector happens to have a better strategy, it should be contributing more to the program.
Thank you so much. I would want now to come to Madam Clara Malikula, NASFAM. We have heard somehow that perhaps targeting, and I think that's what our colleague Jan pointed out, that one of the challenges with some level of ineffectiveness of the AIP and its different names in the past has been the poor targeting. And one suggestion is to target cooperatives instead of individuals, that the individuals that are less productive, they don't have enough productive resources like land or labor, they should just be given cash transfers. But instead, we should look at cooperatives like NASFAM has been providing for these cooperatives across the country. Is this indeed, you think, from where you sit, the model that we should be looking at in redesigning AIP? And what makes you think that is such a compelling case that everybody else should believe that that should be the route we should be taking?
Ndizoonadi kuti mabungwe ngati NASFAM tizitha kutengapo gawo kuthandiza alimi athu chifukwa choti ifeyo ngati bungwe timalimbikitsa alimi athu kukumana pamodzi kuti azithanso kupeza mbewu zochuluka ali pamodzi. Komanso kusadalira kwambiri AIP chifukwa timaphunzitsanso zopanga manyowa amene amabwezeretsa nthaka. Chifukwa AIP sikuti wina aliyense amakhala program apezeka kuti ena palibe ena alipo. Amene palibewo azikhala ndi mtima kuti atha kuzidalira paokha akakhala kuti akutha kupanganso manyowa paokha ngati imene fertilizer. Ife tili ngati bridge kwa alimi ang'onoang'ono kwaunikira zimene angathe kupanga kuti asavutike komanso ulimi wawo asakhale umodzi kuti chasikayi chimanga chokha chifukwa fertilizer amathandiza kuchimanga komanso azilima mbewu zing'ono zoti azithanso kugulitsa kuti azipeza ndalama. Ndikonza kutero. Thank you.
Zikomo kwambiri kuti mwayankhulira alimi anzanu. Ndikukhulupirira kuti Anjolombole nawonso asirira kuti nanenso ndikanadziwa nkanangoyankhula muchichewa komabe ndi chikhulupiriro kuti ambiri amva momwe amayankhula mchingerezi muja. Now, let me come to the final point of a policymaker. We have a plan in the House in the name of PS Masanjala, PS responsible for economic planning and development. You've heard what MWAPAT has presented. They've got short, medium, and long-term options that we should be looking at if we're going to have a better AIP. From where you sit, do you think they have hit it enough? Have they come home really to suggest things when you look at the political economic context that you as a planner can go and meet the president and say, Mr. President, I've been to a MWAPAT function. This is what we should do. And if so, within what you've held, what would you be prioritizing as policy options?
With your indulgence for me to be audible enough. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, for the question that you have raised. I think from where I sit as a national planner, the first question that I ask myself is the AIP a productivity enhancing program or a social protection program? Are we trying to help poor people or are we trying to help people be productive? If we can actually answer that question, it would help us in terms of who we target the program at. So normally, I think listening from what the PS has said, this is a productivity enhancing program. But listening to the presentation that has been made, there is allusion that it does not help in the productivity because there are people that are being targeted who do not have the resource base complementary to the inputs that they would receive in order to deliver the production that's targeted. The second issue, I think, as a national planner, is to concede that subsidies are indispensable in the management of the affairs of a nation. All countries have subsidies. The difference that we have is the ability of the country to fund the subsidies it desires to give to its people. In North Africa, they subsidize fuel. Here, we are subsidizing the production of maize. So the subsidy program is indispensable, that we agree. But when we listen to the presentation that has been made, a number of issues have been raised. And in the discussion, these issues really go to the sustainability of the subsidy. One, is it fiscally sustainable? In other words, are you able through your fiscus to cover the requirements of the subsidy? Second, the subsidy, we have learned from the presentation, in agriculture, it's crowding out the rest of agriculture investments. Can we do agriculture better in a way that the subsidy does not crowd out the other investments? The subsidy has an impact on foreign exchange. So you are using a lot of foreign exchange. If you look at the pattern over the years, the way years where we used up to 150 million US dollars in order to import fertilizer for a crop that does not contribute to the generation of foreign exchange. So that's something else that we need to think about.
And then you have the questions of efficiency. Is the AIP value for money? In other words, if you spend 140 billion on the agriculture input subsidy program, and then you look at other possible investments that you could have made with 140 billion, is it value for money? So these are questions that I would have loved an answer for. And I know if PRI and MAPAT have done a paper that has looked at alternative investments that you could use the money for AIP, but that's a discussion for another day. Therefore, if I was to talk about redesigning AIP, what questions would I have been asking? The first question in the redesign is who should get it? The question of whether we have agreed it should be around, the question but should be who should be getting it, which raises the issue of targeting. Who should we be targeting? The second question about the design of a program, whether social protection or subsidy in agriculture, is what should the benefits package be? Is 2 bags, 25 kg base or 25 kg top, sufficient to help increase productivity? So the benefits package needs to be thought about. Number 3, what is the implied subsidy? In other words, if we are going to offer fertilizer to our people, what contribution should our own people make towards the fertilizer, and what contribution should government make? So I would still want to learn about this, and indeed the issue of universality of the program. Should the program cover everyone, or should the program cover every crop? Or should people have a flexible voucher which they can use to redeem something they want? If you want fertilizer for tobacco, use it. If you want fertilizer for soya, use it. Or should we tie the coupon to maize? So as we are talking about redesigning the program, these are issues that we also need to take into account. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
That's why I had to keep the PS to be the last, because I think by nature he's so good at summarizing what the rest of the colleagues have put together. So you've made my life very easy. I don't have to even summarize. But suffice to mention that colleagues were also asking me to summarize what Madam Malikula mentioned, because we have some people on the platform in US that are also listening. And they thought that what was coming out was important, but they couldn't hear what it was that she said. But I think the point was that she was emphasizing the aspect of cooperatives, that it is one model that they're already using in terms of enhancing food security and the agricultural productivity, including teaching how people in groups can use issues of manure, other soil enhancing mechanisms apart from organic fertilizers. So she feels that it's already something that is happening on the ground, and if the AIP can target the cooperatives, it would actually enhance its effectiveness. So I think that's the summary of what she was saying. But having said that, I think my time has come to the end of it, unless I'm given more leeway, because what I wanted more was us to have more engagement. In any case, this time is not enough. The issue of AIP is such an important topic that you need more time to engage and tease off issues because its ramifications are long-term. So you want to make sure that you're putting upfront to the policymaker something that they can uptake and utilize with strong evidence having been teased off. So I would want us to have more time to the plenary. That's why I want to give it to release the team so that Prof. Mangani can come to then hear what else the colleagues in the room have got to say in ensuring that we have a watertight proposals that we can put forward to the authorities. Suffice to mention that I can quickly summarize somehow that it seems clear that there is an agreement that we need the AIP. The AIP is important, but I think the issue now is the scale of it. And when we're talking about the scale, we're also looking at who should then get the AIP, including if we're going to package it, what should be in it? Is it just fertilizer bags, legumes? Should it go with manure? Should it go soil enhancing mechanism? Should it go with extension services? What should be the package in the AIP when we've found those that we want to target? And then the contribution levels to it. Of course, what some of us would also love to see is clearly, if Mwapata has not done this yet, to clearly define the kind of options that are available. So that we create scenarios to say the scenario A, there's B, there's C, D, that government can think about taking. And that we are proposing that we go for scenario C, because from what PS Maweru has rightly pointed out, scenario D provides us with the most beneficial program for food security on a sustainable basis. So that if we take it back to our political masters, they should be able to go and stand back on the podium and say, look, we are redesigning this because we believe now, if we take option D, you're actually more food secure than where we were at the beginning. I think with that, I want us to give a big round of applause to the colleagues that we are sitting there. Let's give them a big round of applause. And I would want to ask them to take back their seats so that we can revert back to the moderator, and then we can have a bit more time with the plenary to tease off the remaining issues. Thanks, moderator.
A big round of applause as well for the moderator himself. Dr. Muntali has done a good job. Now we want to proceed into bringing out our views. After all these discussions, what do we think? What do we want to see being done in this nation? I would like to invite Dr. Ronald Mangani. Professor Mangani is an associate professor of economics at the University of Malawi. He was Secretary of the Treasury between 2014 and 2017, and he is a founding member of the Economics Association of Malawi, a network member of the African Economic Research Consortium, and part of the global faculty of the Trade Policy Training Center in Africa. Would you please walk to the front as we welcome you, sir? Just as he comes to the front, please remember to sign the registration form on your table if you have not done that already. And those that are online, please remember to register your name, give us your email and your institution of association. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremony. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Secretary for Agriculture, Chairperson of Mwapata Institute, all protocols observed, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We've heard from the policymakers, we've heard from the technicians, we've heard from representatives from the farming community, and I think it's time now for us to pronounce ourselves as well on this very important subject of the Affordable Inputs Program. What has already come out is that the program is useful, it plays a significant role, it has a reason for which it was formulated, but that at the same time, it is very important for us to begin to bang our heads and see how best we can move forward with this program. My job this evening is to simply invite you to pronounce yourselves, either by way of asking questions or making comments. And in this process, not only will I be inviting comments from those that are physically present here, I'll also be inviting comments from colleagues that are participating in this roundtable discussion virtually. And in that regard, I would like to encourage those that are participating virtually to contribute their comments or send through their questions by linking up with Ndidza. I think she's coordinating that part of the program. So let me just, at this point, invite you to come through with any questions that you want to raise or comments that you want to make. I must admit I will not be able to recognize each one of you personally, but I'll take hands and I'll start with 5. Let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in that order, starting from here. If possible, just, quickly say who you are and where you are directing your question to, or where you're directing your comment to, as the case may be.
Thank you very much, moderator. I'm Candida Nakuma, Vice President for the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World. I would like to thank you all for the presentations, and I have 3 issues that I wanted to raise in line with what has been presented by the presenters, but also the panelists. The first one, I think, just to agree that indeed AIP needs to target productive poor. There is no reason for us to be giving resources to farmers that we know will not be able to utilize that resource. These are the people that we see selling their coupons because at that particular time, their need is now, is current. So even if we give them a coupon, they will not, it's not very useful to them. So they would rather sell it, get the money, no matter how small the amount is, but that's not the objective of why we're giving them the coupon. So indeed, targeting the productive poor becomes very critical. Secretary for Planning raised a very critical question. Is AIP value for money? And as he was asking that question, to me, the element of seed came out because the issue is it just a matter of including these other alternatives in the package, or we have the quality seed available? So as we think of redesigning AIP, we also need to look at how we are actually addressing the gaps that we have in the seed systems. Right now, we know that we don't have a seed bill. It is not yet approved. We know we need legume seed, which is quality. And I don't think that it is ethical for the government to be using resources as if they are buying seed when they are actually buying grain. So the question is, do we have the right volumes for the seed for these alternatives so that when the farmers access that alternative seed, indeed they get the benefit out of it? And in line with that is the element of soil health. To what extent, as we redesign the AIP, are we prepared to deal with the issues of soil health? There's so much that we are putting in, but if the soil is not ready, then we are not maximizing the value out of the investment. And finally, I wanted to talk about how the AIP is actually addressing the element of agriculture diversification. I think for a long time, as a country, we've been locked in that situation where we talk of tobacco as the main cash crop and maize as the main food crop. And I thought this is an opportunity for us to also diversify both the export as well as the food base that we have. So when you look at the coupon right now, it is only targeting maize. But then if it is flexible, again from Professor Masanjala, will that help us to achieve diversification that we are all looking at? So those are some of the questions that I would like to throw back as we think about redesigning. How are we looking at all these areas? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take the next comment. I'm not very sure whether, Candida, you expect responses from some of the policymakers around here, or most of the issues that you raised could be taken as comments. But for instance, the issue about soil health, do you want to see a response coming through?
I guess for the most part, those were comments. Yes. As we think about redesigning, how do we look at seed systems, for example? Exactly. How do we look at soil health issues so that we maximize value for money in this important program?
Exactly. And I'd like to believe that those that are responsible for reforming the program moving forward are taking note of these comments. I'll take the next intervention. There was another hand here. I saw, yes, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mangani. Allow me, if you will, to step outside of Malawi for a moment. Today's invasion of Ukraine will have huge global implications. Ukraine is a major exporter of wheat and maize, and prices will rise further, as will the prices of fuel. Russia and Ukraine are both major producers of fertilizer, so sanctions will therefore have an impact on global fertilizer prices. That's some real global realpolitik that will be important for many, many countries in the world. Of course, some farmers will benefit from this, but it's unlikely to be those in the greatest need in Malawi. In that context, and with Malawi facing its own economic and fiscal challenges, it's really good to see a recognition and a willingness to talk seriously about reforming AIP. There's a real need to do that in this resource-constrained world. Therefore, it's great to have this session in particular, because it's great to talk about options, and it's really helpful to learn from others. As an example, at COP26 last November, an initiative called Just Rural Transition was launched, and it's designed to support countries who are embarking on reforming subsidy regimes. There's also some really great discussions in this room about really serious things that government could consider doing on reforming AIP. Deciding to make a change is a really brave thing to do, but figuring out what to do and then doing it is a really critical next step. And for Malawi, you've heard people say it in this room from our perspective, reducing the costs to the government's budget, targeting productive farmers, making long-term sustainable investments are really important, but also making sure that there's a social safety net for those poorer households that are really in need of food security. And with apologies, I didn't introduce myself at the start. My name's Fiona Ritchie. I'm the Development Director for the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. So emphasizing further the significance of having this kind of dialogue, recognizing the importance of ensuring that we're learning from the experiences of others, but also, emphasizing that it's important for us to properly target beneficiaries of the Affordable Input Program. I saw another hand. Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Charles Govert from Moyo Agribusiness Foundation. My first part of my questions was covered by the lady over there, because I was going to talk about the logistics around fertilizer. Right now, whoever does the budgeting of this, they will have to go back and look at how much product would the 140 billion budget approved in Parliament or proposed in Parliament be enough for the targets already. So my question is about logistics. So right now, when you look at the budget that they have, we are looking at 3.5 million bags of fertilizer. And we are looking at 1.7 million households, looking at it whole without even covering the logistics. So what does it mean? It means that the Parliament has not given enough money for the AIP, which we are saying we should redesign. So the question is, who is listening? Because the ones who make these decisions are the politicians, and I don't know whether we have got the key politicians here. Because at the end of the day, the discussion that we have here is just talk. Nobody cooks rice. The rice is cooked by the politician. So I want to agree with the Honorable MP or somebody there mentioned about these logistical issues. Again, when you look at the alternative crops, I'm working with a cooperative in Lobby, where the farmers also grow fruits, a lot of fruits and a lot of horticulture products. So just look at a farmer who has got just about 14 trees. Each tree produces about 400 fruits, 400 fruits. At 50 kwacha each, but they sell at 150 kwacha, okay, each. So if you take at 50 kwacha, you are looking at about 20,000 kwacha per tree. And if he puts fertilizer on these trees, the 2 bags that they have on the 14 trees, he will get 4 times more output and a better quality tangerine or orange. So again, the issue of alternative crops comes in. Should we just be looking at maize, or let's have the farmers be able to use the fertilizer differently? I think that question, as also alluded by Madam from ATI, is key. I have other issues, but I hope the others will cover them. But the key issue here is that we are already off budget today with the issues in Mariupol and using where a lot of urea fertilizer comes from. Then again, the ships that bring the fertilizer, because a lot of cheap transport in ships comes from that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that comment. So you are emphasizing on the importance of ensuring that we are providing adequate resources to the program, but at the same time also, agreeing with those that are saying that it is important for us to actually diversify, the coverage of the program. There was another hand at the back. Yes, please. I think it was yours, and then there'll be one more at the back. Those will be 5, and then we'll take what we are receiving from those that are attending virtually. So I'll take your hand, please.
Thank you.
Wasn't it you in the blue mask? Yes, it was you, yes. Thank you. May you go ahead, please. May we give him a mic? As he is getting the mic, I have 2 questions for Dr. Yan. The first question that I want to ask is, what should we be doing to poor farmers that have both land and labor, but they're still poor? Because the analysis that you provided seemed to be saying, for the poor, we have this solution for those that have land but don't have labor, and we have this solution for those that have labor but don't have land. What about the poor, who are basically a majority, small holdings of land, and of course, able to supply labor? What kind of program should we be thinking about for them? The second question is, and these are questions coming from me. The second question is, strictly speaking, why should we actually be subsidizing a productive farm? What is the definition of a productive farmer in that context? If we're going to subsidize a productive farmer, then why would that be different from simply having a universal subsidy program? Wouldn't the definition of a productive farmer be somebody that can actually survive in the marketplace with the vagaries that are associated with the marketplace? I'll take those questions or comments that will come from that colleague. You have the mic? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Henry Chinkaipe. I have 3 questions. The first one is about the policy objectives of the program. We're discussing the reform of the program. And do I understand from what the moderator Muntali and what the PS said, that the policy goal is not open to discussion and not open to reform? Because I am hearing a lot of people wanting the program to be a vehicle for other policy objectives, such as diversification and maybe commercialization too. Why is it closed at that stage? The second issue, moderator, is that the program is known for being cost inefficient. It is a very expensive program with suboptimal results and outcomes. And I am not hearing from the Mwapata study or presentation, or indeed from people here, what are the perverse incentives in the entire framework of managing and delivering IPE that makes the program so expensive? Because we hear that we can deliver a similar program, but at a much lower cost. And we're not talking about the perverse incentives, particularly in the public procurement system for this program. And lastly, I think in particular from the previous cycle of IPE, we are seeing increasing cases of fake seed and fertilizers with the soil mixed in it, which means that we are spending public money to buy what is not seed and to buy what is not fertilizer. And we are giving that to farmers to do what with those things. So I would like to hear a little bit more of reform with respect to how we monitor the delivery of the program and particularly the quality of the inputs that are being delivered through the program. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chingaipe. I think there is a last one of the 5. I think we'll be taking that from here.
Thank you very much, moderator. I'm Albert Changaya, CEO for Agricultural Research and Extension Trust. I think my concern is on improving yield response to nitrogen. And I think this is a big concern because we all are aware that if we can get lower yields from these inputs, then the program will be very, very inefficient. So it's a concern, but when you're looking at the presentation from Dr. Nyondo, the short-term and even long-term interventions, most of these are already in the R&D. A lot of research has already gone into this, and there's a recommendation. Maybe the concern that I would put forward to Minister of Agriculture is how do we repackage these recommendations so that farmers can be more efficient in the use so that they produce better results. One of the concerns that we have is on the soil health, as Dr. Candida Nakuma pointed out. Right now, we are worried that we're losing about 29 tons of topsoil through erosion. And this is, we're just moving from maybe 10 years ago when we were talking about 22 tons. So 10 years from now, who knows, we might be talking about 30-something tons per hectare. And what basically we're saying is that farmers are using subsoil in their production because the topsoils are gone. And this is a big concern. So how do we repackage the recommendations that are already there from R&D to assist the farmers so that they are more efficient? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. At that point, before I take the comments that are coming virtually, let me just pause and find out from policymakers around here and indeed other experts that are around, because I take note of the fact that Dr. Chingaipe and the last comment here about how we repackage existing recommendations might be issues that people want to pronounce themselves on. So just to recap on what Dr. Chingaipe has brought out as specific questions, why is it that the issue of policy is not open to dialogue? Why is it that we are, consistently implementing a very expensive program when cheaper alternatives are available to us? What are the perverse incentives that make us to do this? And how do we package the program in such a way that it becomes productive in the way that people are saying that it should be productive here? And then the other question that is coming through in the last intervention, just to repeat what has been said, is most of these things have already been discussed. There are policy recommendations that have been made to that effect. What is it that is preventing us from implementing already existing policy recommendations? I would like to find out, I don't know whether I'm being unfair in putting policymakers on the spot. If it is possible to pronounce themselves, I would invite them to pronounce themselves on these issues at this point. May we kindly supply a microphone to the high table.
Yeah, moderator, I think I'll pick one or two.
Yes, please. And
then my colleagues can come in. Firstly, I want to respond to the question about seed. I think seed under the AIP, I don't think we can find fake seed being distributed under the program. Because one, upon the expression of interest from the suppliers on what quantities they have, there is basically physical verification on what seed is there in the warehouses. And the suppliers declare the quantities. Number one. Number two, this season, we piloted a scratch card system where a farmer, when they buy the seed, they would scratch, and then there's a number which when they enter into a number on the phone, it will respond and say, this seed is certified, it was certified on such a day, its germination percentage was such, and then the farmer would be able to verify and say, yes, this is genuine seed. In the absence of that scratch card, that means that seed is fake. And then during the redemption period, the seed services unit of the ministry under the Department of Research, staff go around verifying and checking what is happening on the seed redemption. And then regarding the policy, I think the overarching objective is food security. And that cannot be compromised. That's what is not going to change, because we need to sustain our consumption and ensure that we are food secure. I said the alternative to not producing adequate food is a waste devil, because you have to import. And we have a lot of challenges to import food, because Malawi has a lot of challenges logistically. So I think the better devil is for us to ensure that we produce food that satisfies the need of the nation. But we are saying, let's redesign and see how we can bring efficiency in the program. So what we are saying is we are not compromising on the objective of food security, but we have to see that we are delivering based on efficiency so that we provide fiscal space. Basically, I think that's what I can say on policy.
Thank you very much. Dr. Yan, do you want to address the two issues that I raised earlier on quickly? And then we can go to what we are receiving virtually. Fortunately, we're running out of time already. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for those questions. I'll try to be quick. Professor Mangani, you asked why target. Why should we target farmers who are productive? You'll excuse me the shortcut that I take. What I meant by productive farmers was farmers who have the ability to productively use those inputs. Right? That does not necessarily mean that they would be productive without the subsidy. Now, you also asked, should we be subsidizing at all? I would say that is perhaps a slightly moot question at the moment. I think our colleagues from the political arena would agree that this is politically unfeasible at the moment not to subsidize, regardless of what we think about the value for money of that subsidy. What to do with farmers who have the labor requirements, who have the land, but are still poor? Well, I think that shows to the partial ineffectiveness of the program in its current form. If we implement the other policies that have been suggested, those will help these farmers as well. They will help them raise their productivity, become less poor, and hopefully this will also eventually make the appetite for reducing the subsidy further politically more acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just take a few that we've received through our participants online. So there are many, and I will try to be as brief as possible. Livingston Tiona, it is unfortunate that the biggest customer, so as to say, of the private sector appears to be government. Looking at how the legume seed suppliers cried when the same was not included in the AIP package, one wonders whether the private sector can survive without government tenders. Dr. Bright Sivale, AIP assumes that all smallholder farmers are homogeneous, which is not correct. That is why proper targeting is critical. With good understanding of the smallholder farmer and their capabilities, the objectives of the program could be streamlined, with some pseudo farmers moved down to social protection programs, hence improving program efficiency. Arnold Chikavanga, the question goes to the PS for economic planning. The just announced budget talks about reforming AIP by introducing safety nets in the form of public works program. He says PWP, I'm assuming this is public works program. If possible, could you unpack a bit more on this one? From Beatrice Taga, building on Arnold Chikavanga's question, what is the plan for those labor and land constrained households that will exit the AIP? Is their transition to the social cash transfer program being considered? Beatrice Taga is from UNICEF. There is another intervention coming from MacLeod Chirwa. The quality checks need to be extended to fertilizer. The low productivity of AIP is a combination of several factors which need to be looked into when redesigning. There are a couple of questions that are coming, that are going to the Secretary for Economic Planning and Development. Professor Masanja.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think there are two questions that have been raised. And indeed, the minister in the budget statement did declare that the AIP is being reformed. In the reform, should there be people that are left out? You need to think about a social protection mechanism that will take care of them even as they transition out of AIP. So right now, the numbers are being worked, but that's the thinking that if you're going to reform the AIP, the first thing that you need to have is what we call AIP plus. This can be AIP plus social cash transfers or AIP plus public works, but it has to be AIP plus some social protection program. So that's where we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. I am allowed to take a couple more questions. And a couple is turning out to be more than two. Stand to be guided. We don't have the luxury of time. This is already 7 o'clock and the program said that we should be finishing by 7 o'clock. A couple should be a couple. Madam, you wanted to say something, please. And then I will use discretion to pick one last one.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mine is a small comment. After listening to what people have said, I was thinking maybe we need to redefine what food security is. Because for me, it's not only maize. And I was hoping that as we are thinking about redesigning, maybe we need to include economic empowerment, which has got some flexibility in terms of maybe the target groups, small loans, a mixture of how we can go about it, rather than just one solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we need to be thinking through, very carefully to make sure that we are capturing everybody that needs to be captured with the appropriate interventions in that regard. Honorable, you were part of the panel. Please go ahead. I will not count this as the last one.
Yeah, I wanted to say something which if you
could be brief, Honorable.
Yes, something which we have not talked much about, crowding out the private sector. I think that has not been said much, but I will speak from my platform to say, if there was no AIP, how could they have survived? And what is the total amount of fertilizer that we need in this country, that if we just allocate the AIP to just buy direct as government to government, that they will suffer? I think that should also be looked into, because when we say, there was a presentation which they said, the presenter said, it seems like we are chasing a number of objectives on just one program, which is catastrophic, because this is food security. We cannot work now on using the very same program to empower indigenous Malawians who are defaulting even in their tenders. We cannot, and it's costly. So I think on that one, it should be thought about. That's what I wanted to comment.
No, that's
Thanks.
a very, very important intervention. We need to be very careful in terms of perception with respect to the implications of the program on the private sector. One last one, sir. Thank you.
Finally.
Thank you, moderator. Basically, subsidies, I'm not a politician, but I know that subsidies appear in the political parties' manifestos. And this journey we are here, we are all technicians here. We should also engage the politicians heavily because subsidies appear in the political parties' manifestos. And if they are left around, this technical discussion will take us nowhere. Secondly, it's the investment in the subsidy. We have seen a 23% reduction. Where has the 33 billion gone? Is it reinvested in the same agriculture sector according to the NAIP intervention areas, or it has disappeared elsewhere? We have seen the impact of Cyclone Anna. Issues of climate change have not been discussed here at length in the report or elsewhere. So despite redesigning the subsidies, if we are hit by another cyclone and we don't put measures on climate change adaptation and mitigation, the impact will be all wasted in the process. Lastly, but not least, I think the cost-benefit analysis. Can we have other alternatives? In the past, we used to have press agriculture farmers, they were producing food and food. Smallholders in Malawi do have a very small piece of land. They can't really produce food on their own. So for subsidies for who? Where are the anchor farms? Who killed them? All those should be a point of reflection. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that last intervention. So we need to make sure that we are, taking these messages to the people that make decisions. And one would have wanted that we should have as much political representation here as possible. We also need to be looking at how the whole agricultural sector has been impacted on over the passage of time, and therefore limit our expectations with respect to what the subsidy program can deliver in the context of other non-performing activities in the agricultural sector. It is also, very clear that we should be asking ourselves where the reduction in the affordable inputs program has gone. And I think a quick answer that can be given to that is that when you look at the budget numbers in the proposed or the draft budget, the other recurrent transactions component of the agricultural ministry allocation has actually declined, which means that those resources have actually moved to other ministries, departments, and agencies of the government. There is an increase in the development component of the budget for the Ministry of Agriculture, significant increase from about 55 billion or so to 130 something, if I remember the figures correctly. But in terms of the affordable inputs program, because that's part of the recurrent budget of the ministry, one would have expected that a reduction in the program should have increased other provisions within the same ministry, such as extension service and research. And these are issues that people have already raised in the discussions that we have had this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we are past the 7 o'clock mark that was set. I think this has been a very, very rich engagement. I wouldn't want to summarize beyond saying that everybody seems to be agreeing that we need some form of intervention on behalf of the agricultural sector in order to make sure that it becomes more productive, especially to make sure that we achieve food security, because this is the point that is being emphasized by the policymakers. Having said that, it is also coming out very clearly that our experiences with the implementation of the subsidy program seem to suggest that it is very important for us to interrogate certain aspects of the program by way of reforming the program accordingly. And I think the discussion that we have had this evening has highlighted important areas that policymakers and other decision makers that are here and outside of this room will be reflecting on as we move forward in reforming the Affordable Inputs Program. Thank you very much, colleagues, for giving me the opportunity to moderate this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our moderator. He's done a good job. I wouldn't want to take much time as well. I would like to invite our last speaker, Mr. William Chadza, will give us key takeaways from this whole discussion, and he will also give us a vote of thanks. Mr. Chadza, please.
Principal Secretary for Agriculture, Principal Secretary Economic Planning and Development, Board Chair for Mapata Institute, all protocols observed, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am supposed to lay out some of the takeaways from this, but I want to believe that Professor Mangani has done a very good summary in terms of highlighting the key issues emerging from the discussions. Perhaps I can just add to that. One, we have noted that a number of input subsidy programs have been implemented in the country with varying degrees of success, including underperformance due to several factors which have been discussed. Again, also, we have noted that AIP is still needed, but it needs to be redesigned, considering a number of suggested interventions which have been discussed here. But I think more importantly is what should be considered in the redesigning. And I think one of them which has come out quite clearly is about the objectives of the program, the policy objectives, the course of the program, targeting issues, the package and also quality of the inputs, diversification of inputs, and also what kind of complementary programs need to go with it. I think what's also coming out quite important from this discussion is the potential implications of these redesigning or reforms on the private sector. So I think that's also needs has actually come out clearly. And also finally is the issue of social protection program. What's come out also is that there is a space for social protection programs in redefining the AIP. So those are just some of the key takeaways which I wanted to highlight. But moving on also is just on behalf of the Mapata Institute, I would like to thank all of you for being here this evening. And specifically, I would like to thank our moderators, Mrs. Ndidza Chisanu, Dr. Thomas Mundali, and also Professor Ronald Mangani. And also I'd like to thank our presenter, Dr. Kriston Nyondo, and also our discussant, Dr. Yan from IFPRI. I should also not forget our panelists, Professor Masanjala, Honorable Chomanika, Mr. Njolomole, Mr. Yanax, and also Mrs. Malikula. And more importantly, distinguished guests, I would like to thank the Principal Secretary for Agriculture, Mr. Sandra Maweru, representing the Minister of Agriculture, for being here throughout the event. We acknowledge the usual support and keen interest of the ministry. Also, just to conclude, I would like to indicate that in the next few days, a team of policy experts will be analyzing the key issues which have emerged from this discussion this evening, and will prepare a small briefing note which we'll be able to submit and also have some conversation with the ministry. We'll also be able to share that with the rest of the distinguished participants who are here. With that, I just would like to thank all of you for being here. We wish you a great evening. Thank you so much.